Oof, the biggest confusion for us English speakers, how do you say was in Spanish? Well, lucky for you, that's what we're gonna go over today. So, we're gonna cover the 4 ways to say was in Spanish, which are fue, era, estaba, and estuvo. Almost just broke my desk. Anyways, what's the big issue with these 4 words? They all mean was. So, what the fuck is the difference? That's the question we all have. That's why we're here on this video. Prerequisites, before we understand what the difference between each of those 4 is, we have to understand 2 things. The first is the 2 different past tenses in Spanish, the preterite and the imperfect, and then the difference between ser and estar. So the preterite, which is fue and estuvo, is for specific events or moments with a start and end. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on it. That's just the general rule. But the point of this video isn't to go fully in depth on the 2 different past tenses. But the other past tense is the imperfect, which is era and estaba, which is more for continuous actions in the past. So things that you habitually did. It's also used to introduce background context. So if you were to say, when I was a kid, I did this, you would say cuando era niño, and then whatever else you'd say. And it's for ongoing actions or states in the past. So an example of the preterite is yesterday we went to the museum. Ayer fuimos al museo, because you're talking about an event, going to the museum yesterday. Even if there's not a specific start and end date, like specific time, 10 p.m. or whatever, it was yesterday. It's specific enough. Whereas the imperfect, when I was a kid, we always used to go to the beach in the summer. So there's 2 instances of the imperfect there. Cuando era niño, that's the imperfect, so you're setting the background context. And then you're saying siempre íbamos a la playa en verano. Íbamos is the way to say we went. Anyways, I don't want to get too into it. Let's just get into ser versus estar. Ser for more permanent and inherent attributes and characteristics. And there's more to it. That's not the full... For me, this was never enough to really fully understand the difference, because sometimes I would see something and I'd think it's ser, but then it ends up being estar. But it's a good enough general rule, whereas estuvo and estaba is for temporary and situational states. So an example, Madrid es la capital de España, because it's the capital, that's a more permanent state. Whereas if you want to talk about the way Madrid is during holidays, you would say Madrid está muy animada, or very animated, very poppin' during holidays. All right, so the first form of was we're going to cover is fue, which is the preterite, and it's ser. So it's for events with a start and end, and for more permanent characteristics. So the concert was fantastic. That's a more permanent characteristic of the concert, and an inherent, it's not like you're talking about a single moment in the concert where the state of the concert was terrible. You're talking about how the entire concert, its inherent way of being was fantastic. And we don't use era because era is more for an ongoing, or like this is about the concert. It's, you know, there's a start and end date, or it doesn't have to be a date, but there's a start and end moment. So that's why we use fue and not era. So if we move into era is imperfect and ser. So the example you see is it was a sunny day and the children were playing in the park. So this one actually confused me a little, because I thought sunny day, sunny, isn't that a state? Isn't that a changing thing? Shouldn't we use estar? But you would use estar for the weather if it's like right now, está soleado. Like you're talking about right now it's sunny. But if you're talking about the day, like that day it was sunny. That's just an inherent trait of that day. That's a permanent fixed trait of that day. So that's why you use ser, or in the past tense, era. And if you're wondering why you don't use fue and you use era, well, again, we're kind of setting the background context here. We're saying it was a sunny day, but more so it's the fact that the sunniness of the day was ongoing. Now, if you're confused, don't worry. The end of the video will take care of all of your confusions. Anyways, let's move on. Estaba, imperfect, again, continuous, ongoing events in the past, and estar, so for temporary and situational states. So you could say the coffee was hot. El café estaba caliente, right? Because the hotness of the coffee is a temporary or a changing state. So that's why you'd use estar instead of ser. Why would you use estaba instead of estuvo? Well, estuvo is preterite, whereas estaba is like a continuous, ongoing state. So you would use estuvo if you were talking about a specific moment, but in this case, we're not. Anyways, the last one is estuvo. This one I basically never use. I rarely hear, I mean, you hear it sometimes, but estaba, fue, and era are the ones you hear more often. but just for full completion here, estuvo, here's an example. He was here, but he already left. So, estuvo aquí, pero ya se fue. So here we use estuvo because, you obviously wouldn't use ser, you use estar here. ¿Dónde está, right? Where is he? You wouldn't say ¿dónde es? ¿Dónde está? Because his location, it's a person's location, which is always changing. So, estuvo aquí. And why wouldn't it be estaba aquí? Because it's a completed moment. He was here, but he no longer is. Right? So in this context, we would use estuvo. But here's the good news, because you might be just like me, even still confused. I don't know if I'll ever get over the confusion. I don't really care to. Let's get into why. But before we do that, let's try some examples and test our knowledge. The old house was charming. Here you would use, what do you think? You can pause the video if you want to try it. But it is la vieja casa era encantadora. You would use era, and that's because it's ser, because it's an inherent quality of the house, so you wouldn't use estar. And it was ongoing. We're not talking about a specific moment when it was charming. We're talking about, in general, ongoingly, it was a charming house. Okay, example 2. The museum was closed on Mondays. Pause the video if you want to give it a guess. But the answer is, el museo estaba cerrado los lunes. And you use estaba because it being closed is a state, right? It's not a permanent thing. It was just closed on Monday. So it wouldn't be ser. We wouldn't use fue or era. But why wouldn't we use estuvo? Because it was continuously, ongoingly closed on Mondays in this context, right? We're talking about Mondays in general. So you can clearly tell so far that the way, what the speaker is trying to say is what determines what word to use. So it's mainly nuance. How was the date with Maria? Pause it if you want to guess, but the answer is ¿Cómo fue la cita con Maria? The cita, the date, was a completed event, or is a completed event, and you're not talking about how, you're talking about the inherent quality of the date. So you use ser, and you would use fue because it's the preterite, because it's a date. It's not an ongoing thing that happened habitually, just a one-time thing. It was a date. So, ¿Cómo fue la cita con Maria? Next one. While I was in Paris, the Eiffel Tower was magnificent. So there's 2 wases here. What do you think? The answer is, mientras estaba en París, la Torre Eiffel era magnífica. So here you're using estaba for the first was because you're saying you were in Paris continuously, right? So that's why it's the imperfect past tense, not the preterite. But it's your location, like it's not ser. And then the second one, era. Era because, well, it's not estar because the magnificence of the Eiffel Tower is like a permanent inherent quality. So you use ser. And we're not talking about a specific moment. We're just saying in general, while you were in Paris, the Eiffel Tower was magnificent ongoingly. So era. All right. That's the final example. So let me give you a summary and then I'll clear your mind with one statement. So the summary, use estuvo for specific temporary. I don't really want to go through this word for word. So if you care to pause, you can pause and look at what the summary is. But the real juice is this. Let's be real. If you're kind of confused, like I still am to this day, the good news is you don't really have to know any of this shit if you want to converse. Let's be real. Obviously, no Spanish teacher is going to sign me off on what I'm saying. I'm just saying I didn't really know what and when to use these, and I've always been able to have conversations. I've been able to travel and live in Latin America, not really knowing when to use which form of was. So not to say you shouldn't study it, but it is to say that it's not the most important thing you should be focusing all your energy on. And if you don't believe me, Spanish speakers themselves can't agree when to use which, believe it or not. You can look it up. You'll find forum posts, Reddit posts. People don't know when to use which one. There's debates. Like, look at this picture here. The question was about the concert, the way it was. The thing is, I think the correct form is to say el concierto fue. However, in Mexico, we say el concierto estuvo. So, at the end of the day, who really gives a fudge? I just want you to be able to speak Spanish, because at the end of the day, the thing separating you from connecting with the Spanish speaker is not knowing when to use estaba versus era. It's just being able to, for the most part, approximate what you're trying to say. So that's the goal on this channel, get you actually conversational. But if you are curious, you can run back this video and try and really master the differences between all the wases. But nevertheless, if you do prioritize just being able to speak Spanish, you just want to have the practical knowledge to use Spanish in the real world, then you can book a call with me in the description and we can see if we're a good fit for my program where I will get you conversational in Spanish. And it's a 3-month program. Obviously, after that, if you want to really dial in your Spanish, you're going to have to continue doing the same work on your own. But the point of the program is to get you just aware of how to actually become conversational and to get you actual conversational practice on a weekly basis so that you actually do what it takes to become conversational. So yeah, if you are interested, you can book a call with me or shoot me a DM on Instagram and I would be happy to help. So anyways, that's it for this video and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.